She has been a teacher in Seoul for 3 years. Every morning she walks the same corridor, marks the same papers, crouches down when a student drops something. Calm, private, unremarkable. Under her bedroom floor, in a locked fireproof box, is a folder, 3 centimeters thick, 8 sections, 4.5 years of documentation so precise it looks like it was typeset. She built it alone. She has been waiting for one thing, the right person to hand it to. On a Tuesday in September, a 13-year-old boy walked through the school gates. She was standing at the window when he arrived. She watched him. She felt something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite grief. The sound a lock makes when you find the correct key. Click. Because that boy's last name, she has known it since she was 17. Welcome to Dark Afro-K Diaries TV. This is the woman who counted. 10 years of patience. Let's find out what it built. The corridor of Hanguk International School smelled the way all Korean private schools smelled. Floor wax, cafeteria steam, and the particular tension of students performing excellence for parents who were never satisfied. Omowunmi Adeyemi walked it the way she walked everything. Unhurried, deliberate. Her low heels made a quiet rhythm on the tile, and the students who passed her either nodded or stepped aside, sensing something in her stillness that they could not name but instinctively respected. She was 27 years old. She had been a teacher here for 3 years. She had been ready for 4. "Teacher Wunmi," she turned. A girl in year 10, Sua, was crouched in the middle of the hallway, gathering worksheets that had scattered from a broken folder. Students moved around her with the casual indifference of teenagers who had not yet learned that small humiliations accumulate into large ones. Omowunmi crouched beside her. Not quickly, not dramatically. She simply folded herself to the floor with the calm of someone who had time to spare and began collecting papers. "The biology questions," Sua said, embarrassed. "They went everywhere." "I can see that." Omowunmi straightened a stack. "Do you have another folder, something sturdier?" "I know, I forgot to replace it. Come by the classroom after school. I have extra folders from the supply room, the thick ones with the hard spine." She handed the stack back. "Do not rush. You will crease them." She stood, smoothed her skirt, and continued down the corridor. If you had watched her from the outside, and several people did, because there was something about her that invited watching, you would have seen a composed young Nigerian woman who had built a quiet, useful life in Seoul. A teacher of history and social studies at a bilingual private school. An apartment in Mapogu, 20 minutes by subway. A Friday dinner rotation of 3 restaurants near her building. Church on Sunday mornings, always near the back, always gone before the long greetings began. Calm, private, unremarkable in the way that some people choose to be unremarkable. What you would not have seen was the folder. Not the biology folder. A different one. Kept in a locked fireproof box beneath the floorboard under her bed, in the corner of her apartment where the landlord's inspection light never reached. A folder 3 centimeters thick, with tabs and subfolders, and a timeline that ran backwards from today to 10 years ago. Every entry dated, sourced, and cross-referenced in handwriting so precise it looked like print. 4 years of documentation. She had been ready. She had simply been waiting for the right entry point. It walked through the school gates on a Tuesday in September, wearing a school blazer 2 sizes too large for its thin shoulders, carrying a mother's anxious hope and a father's expectation like visible weight. Park Jiyoung, 13 years old, first week at Hanguk International, the younger sibling of Park Jiyoung. Omowunmi was standing at the window of the history classroom when she saw him arrive. She watched the way the registration office staff fussed over his mother, the particular quality of attention that schools gave to families with money. She watched the mother's careful clothes, the practiced ease of a woman accustomed to being received this way. She watched, and she felt something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite grief. It was more like the sound a lock makes when you finally find the correct key. Click. She turned from the window and picked up her chalk. She had a lesson to teach. Year 11. Social Studies. The topic was transitional justice, how societies deal with historical wrongs, how communities decide what repair looks like, what the difference is between punishment and accountability. Omowunmi taught it the way she taught everything. Without performance, without unnecessary drama. with the particular quality of attention that made students feel she was talking directly to them even when she was looking at the board. "Give me examples," she said. "Historical cases where a society had to decide how to handle a crime that everyone knew had happened, but that no one had been officially made responsible for." Hands. The usual hands: Minji, Yusuf, Clara, who read too much news for 13. And then, from the back, "The Japanese colonial period. My grandfather says Korea was robbed of 35 years and the apologies were never real." She did not know who said it. She looked up. Park Ji-hun. His face was serious in a way that did not match his age. He had the eyes of someone who had been told difficult things early. "That is a significant example," Omowunmi said. She wrote it on the board. "What makes an apology real? Discuss with the person next to you. 2 minutes." The room buzzed. She circled, listened, corrected a factual error about the San Francisco Treaty, asked 2 students to explain their logic more carefully. At the end of the discussion, a girl named Yoonji raised her hand. "Teacher, what is the difference between justice and revenge?" Omowunmi was quiet, not hesitating quiet, thinking quiet. The room felt the difference and went still around it. "One of them can sleep," she said finally. She turned back to the board. "Both want the same outcome for the wrong thing to be acknowledged, but revenge is impatient. It wants to be there when the acknowledgement happens, to see it, to feel it. Justice is willing to wait. Justice can survive the person who first needed it." She paused. "Write that down. It will be on the assessment. Drop a comment if you already feel something you cannot quite name. Because besties, Omowunmi has been carrying this for 10 years and she is just getting started. She does not think about it the way you would expect. She does not have nightmares anymore. Those stopped in year 3 of the documentation, when she had enough material that the fear began to transform into something more useful. Into purpose. Into the specific, concentrated energy of a woman who has decided that the ground she is walking on is temporary, and the ground she is walking toward is real. But sometimes, rarely, she will be doing something ordinary, making tea, folding laundry, waiting for the subway, and the smell of a particular floor wax, or a certain quality of afternoon light, will return her briefly to the corridor of Kingsbridge International Academy in Ibadan. She had been 17. She had been on a scholarship, the Lecky Foundation Award, given to 1 student per year from the public secondary schools in the state. The kind of scholarship that sounds like a door opening but is sometimes a room with no windows. Kingsbridge was a school that served the children of oil executives and politicians, and the Lagos elite who wanted English education with a Korean academic structure. The fees were what a schoolteacher earned in 4 years. Omowunmi was there on the school's sufferance, her fees subsidized to 0, her uniform slightly different from the other girls, because hers was provided by the foundation and the other girls were custom-tailored. They noticed. Park Jiyoung noticed first. She was the daughter of a man who was, at that time, establishing himself in Nigerian real estate, one of the Korean businessmen who had arrived in Lagos in the boom years, positioning themselves in the gaps between Nigerian capital and international opportunity. Jiyoung had her mother's precise beauty and her father's instinct for identifying structural weakness. She identified Omowunmi's structural weakness in the first week. She did not move immediately. That was the thing Omowunmi had needed years to understand. She thought at first that the cruelty had been impulsive, thoughtless. The way teenagers sometimes were. She was wrong. It had been deliberate, calculated, a 2-year project. They took her scholarship essays, the ones she wrote for the next cycle of awards, and submitted altered versions to the foundation office, riddled with plagiarism flags, so that her reapplication was declined with a formal warning. They orchestrated a situation in year 2 that resulted in Omowunmi being accused of cheating in the regional mathematics Olympiad. The evidence was constructed. The teacher who saw through it was transferred mid-term. They documented nothing, left no paper trail, worked through whisper and implication and the particular social physics of a school where their parents' money funded the library extension. In the end, Omowunmi left Kingsbridge without completing her final year. The scholarship was gone. The mathematics Olympiad result was voided. The accusation of academic dishonesty followed her application to 3 universities. She got in on the 4th attempt. A smaller institution. A different trajectory than the one the scholarship had promised. It took her 7 years and 3 jobs to get to Seoul, to complete a qualification that should have taken 4 years from Ibadan at 17. They did not remember her name. She had confirmed this. From a distance. Through the careful archaeology of social media and public records that is available to anyone patient enough to conduct it. They did not remember her name, and they had moved forward into excellent lives with the confidence of people who have never had reason to look over their shoulder. Omowunmi had spent 4 years giving them a reason. Besties, can we take a breath together? Because what I just described is not dramatic. It is the kind of slow, structural cruelty that does not leave marks. The kind that courts cannot easily see and communities often do not believe. Drop a comment if you have ever tried to explain a wound that left no bruise. The folder had 8 sections. Section 1 was a timeline, from the first day of Omowunmi's enrollment at Kingsbridge to the present day. Every significant event documented, with source notations. She had been meticulous about source. Testimony without documentation was noise. Documentation without context was partial. She had both. Section 2 was financial. The Park family's business interests in Nigeria, their current corporate structure in Korea, the specific contracts and municipal approvals that had come through channels she had spent 2 years learning to read. Not illegal, necessarily, but irregular. The kind of irregularity that becomes significant when a regulator is looking. Section 3 was the other 4. She had not forgotten them because they were not the ringleader. They were equally documented. Their current positions, their professional reputations, the small and large untruths embedded in their public profiles. Sections 4 through 7 were evidence of the specific acts. She had obtained 3 of the 4 witnesses through patience and time. People who had known the truth in Ibadan, who had kept quiet because they were young or afraid, or in positions that required their silence. 2 of them had agreed to formal statements. One had given her a document she had not expected, something that corroborated the mathematics Olympiad situation with specificity that still made her hands feel cold when she read it. Section 8 was legal strategy. She had not gone to a lawyer in Seoul yet. She had done significant research herself. She knew what was prosecutable in Nigeria, where several of the acts had occurred, and what might be actionable in Korea given the business irregularities and the location of the family now. She knew the limitations period arguments. She knew the evidentiary thresholds. She was not a lawyer, but she had spent 4 years studying this particular case with the focus of someone who understood that the preparation mattered more than the performance. She was ready. She needed one thing she did not have: a credible official channel into which the documentation could be placed with enough authority to compel investigation rather than ignored. Park Jiyoung walking through the gates of Hanguk International was not the channel itself. He was the proximity to the channel. He was the reason she now had access to the family's current movements, their social context in Seoul, the specific edges of their life here that she had not been able to reach from a distance. She would not use the child. She had been clear with herself about this from the beginning. She would use what the child's presence allowed her to observe. There is a difference. She had made herself understand that difference completely before she activated any part of what came next. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table. She opened her laptop and went back to a public registry she had bookmarked 14 months ago. She typed a name. She had been waiting for this particular update for 9 months. It had posted 3 days ago. Detective Kang Joonseok, assigned to the Special Investigations Unit, Seoul Metropolitan Police Agency. Previously, 3 years with the Financial Crimes Division. She had found him by accident 18 months ago. A name in a public filing related to a municipal corruption inquiry that overlapped with one edge of the Park family's Korean business activity. He had been asking questions, different questions than hers, from a different angle, about a different underlying concern. But the questions had been pointing toward the same geography. She wrote his name in her notebook, beneath a date and a question mark. Then she closed her laptop and went to bed. She slept. She always slept. That was what justice felt like. Detective Kang Joonseok's desk was not messy in the way that indicated chaos. It was messy in the way that indicated that the person behind it had too many cases and not enough wall space, and had long since made peace with the pile system. He was 32 years old, Gwangyang-born, a port city in South Jeolla province, the kind of place that produces people who understand long supply chains and the patience required to track something moving slowly across a large distance. His father had worked the POSCO steelworks. His mother had taught middle school maths. He had joined the police at 24 after a false start in accounting that had at least given him skills useful in financial crime investigation. He had been in the Special Investigations Unit for 14 months. He was, by his own assessment and his supervisor's grudging acknowledgement, quite good at noticing things. What he had noticed, over the past 8 months, was a particular shape in the information landscape around the Park Jae-seok family's Korean holdings. Park Jae-seok was not under investigation. He was not, technically, a person of interest. He was a Korean businessman with a successful real estate development company, a respectable address in Seongbuk-gu, and a daughter at a good university and a son recently enrolled at a private school. But in the course of examining a municipal approvals process in Mapo-gu, an entirely separate case, now closed, Joonseok had encountered a signature pattern that he recognized. Not Park Jae-seok's signature, a ghost signature, the kind that appeared when decisions that should have had full committee review had been expedited by a single approving officer. He had seen this pattern before. In Lagos, of all places, a Nigerian corruption case that had briefly been newsworthy in Korean financial press 2 years ago because it involved a Korean national. He had filed a note, flagged it for future cross-reference, moved on. 8 months later, the same ghost signature appeared in a Yongsan-gu development application. Different officer, different project, same expediting pattern. Both projects had Park Jae-seok's company as a named beneficiary. He began, carefully and unofficially, to look more carefully. What he found was not enough to open a formal case. It was not enough to bring to his supervisor. It was the texture of something, the way a room sometimes feels wrong before you can identify what the wrong thing is. He had a feeling, developed over 8 years of investigation, that someone else was looking, that the questions he was discovering gaps in had already been asked by someone, somewhere, who was working from a different direction. He could not identify who. There was no opposing file, no parallel investigation that he could locate. Just the absence of information in places where information should have been, the way a photograph can show the outline of something that has been removed. He began a list, private, separate from the official file, what I know, what I do not know, what someone else might know. He taped it to the inside of his desk drawer where his supervisor would not see it. He had learned patience in Gwangyang, watching cargo ships load at the port. The important thing was not to rush before the container was full. He was not yet sure what he was carrying, but he was going to find out. The autumn parent information evening fell on a Thursday. Omowunmi did not usually attend these. Her role was classroom instruction, not parental liaison, and the administration had a dedicated staff for the parent-facing components. But this year, because the head of social studies was on medical leave, she had been asked to present the Year 10 curriculum overview. She prepared her slides the way she prepared everything. Precisely, without excess. She arrived 15 minutes early, set up the projector, arranged the handouts in neat stacks at the edge of the table. Parents began arriving at 7. The room filled with the particular social noise of people performing normality for each other. The friendly inquiries about summers and school readiness that carried underneath them the comparative anxiety of parents who had staked significant money on a particular educational outcome. She stood near the projector, reviewing her notes. She did not look up when the door opened at 7:12. She did not need to. She had been expecting this. The room changed in a small, specific way. The quality of the social performance shifted, the way a room sometimes shifts when someone enters who believes they are important and a certain portion of the room agrees with them. She had seen this shift around Park Jiyoung in Ibadan for 2 years. She understood now where the daughter had learned it. She waited 4 seconds. Then she looked up. Mrs. Park, The mother was scanning the room with the pleasant efficiency of a woman who considers every social environment a venue to be assessed and optimized. She wore a cream blazer, pearl studs, an expression of thoughtful engagement that Omowunmi recognized as performance. Mr. Park was not with her. The son, Jiyoung, was at her elbow, looking around with the quiet watchfulness that Omowunmi had noticed in him in class. Mrs. Park's eyes moved through the room. They reached Omowunmi. They passed over her, came back. The expression did not change. That was the impressive part. Omowunmi had expected recognition to show on the face, and it almost did a micro-expression, half a second, the involuntary response of a nervous system that has encountered something it did not expect. But Mrs. Park controlled it in under 2 seconds. Her eyes moved on. She made a small remark to Jiyoung, touched his shoulder, steered toward a group of other parents near the window. Omowunmi counted to 3. Then she looked back at her notes. Both of them knew now. The question was who would move first. Omowunmi already knew the answer. She would not be moving first. She had not waited 4 years to rush now. She clicked the projector to the first slide. "Good evening, parents. I am Miss Adeyemi and I teach history and social studies to your Year 10 students." Her voice was exactly what it always was. Calm, clear, unhurried. In the 3rd row, Mrs. Park sat very still and listened. "Besties, did you feel that?" The moment Omowunmi did not react. When someone expects you to flinch and you simply do not drop a fire in the comments. Because that kind of control is earned. That is 10 years of earned control. She did not make the move immediately. This was important. The people she was dealing with were the kind of people who had spent years operating in environments where threat preceded action, who had learned, from wealth, and from watching their parents navigate Korean business culture and Lagos money culture simultaneously, that the first sign of intention was followed immediately by countermovement. If she moved the day after the parent evening, Mrs. Park would know it was a direct response. Would have 2 days lead time to contact lawyers, to reframe the narrative, to move first in the spaces Omowunmi could not see. So Omowunmi waited 3 weeks. In those 3 weeks, she observed. She watched Jiyoung in class. Not for strategy, she had made herself a clear promise about the child, but because watching him helped her understand the family's current domestic architecture. He was a serious, somewhat lonely boy who asked better historical questions than most of his classmates, and carried the particular internal pressure of a child who has been told, implicitly, that the family's standing is partly his responsibility. She watched the body language of the Year 10 parents at the midterm coffee morning. Who orbited Mrs. Park? How much distance was maintained? Which relationships were functional versus strategic? She had attended once, briefly, and the information had been worth the discomfort. She confirmed what she had suspected. The Parks were here on a specific timeline. Mr. Park's Korean corporate registration showed a development project in its 3rd year that would require final government approvals within the next 8 months. The family was settled enough to send Jiyoung to school here, but not so settled that their roots could not be pulled up cleanly. She had 8 months at most before the project concluded, and the family's reason to be in Seoul was resolved. She recalibrated the timeline. Then, on a Monday morning, she submitted a request for continuing professional development leave. 1 week. The request was for an academic conference in Busan, an actual conference. She was actually registered. She had prepared an actual abstract. She needed 3 days. She spent the first day in the National Archives reading room. She had a research question, neatly framed in academic language, that required access to a specific range of property development public records from 2019 to 2021. The archivist was helpful. The records were in good order. She found in approximately 4 hours the specific filing she had been looking for. It was not the evidence itself. It was the procedural record that showed who had reviewed a specific application and on what basis. 3 signatures. One of them belonged to a municipal official who had been mentioned, briefly, in a public interest disclosure that had been filed and set aside 2 years ago. She photographed it with her phone, carefully, legally, public record. The second day she spent on the phone, in a quiet corner of a café in Gwanghwamun, speaking with one of her witnesses in Ibadan. The woman's name was Chidinma. She was 31 now, a pharmacist, married with one child. She had been a student at Kingsbridge in Omowunmi's year. She had seen things. They had spoken 8 times over the past 3 years. Carefully, building trust slowly, the way Omowunmi built everything. "I am ready to write it formally," Chidinma said. Her voice on the call was clear and steady. "My husband knows. He says it is the right thing." "There will be scrutiny," Omowunmi said. "They will question your timeline. They will suggest your memory is unreliable after 10 years. I kept a diary." A pause. "I did not realize at the time why I was keeping it. I was young. I wrote things down because the situation made me uneasy and writing was how I processed unease. But I wrote down what I saw." Omowunmi's hand tightened on her phone. She had not known about the diary. "Tell me," she said quietly. "Tell me what you wrote." She spent the next 2 hours listening, taking notes in shorthand on the small pad she always carried. When the call ended, she sat still for a moment with her hand on her notebook and felt something she did not have language for, a weight partially lifted, not because the task was done, but because it was no longer only hers. Because it had been witnessed, held by more than one person, and the witnessing changed it. The 3rd day she spent in her hotel room in Busan. She had gone to Busan. She was thorough, reviewing the full file with the new material incorporated. Then she attended the conference for 2 days and presented her abstract on transitional justice mechanisms in post-colonial educational institutions. And 3 academics in the audience told her afterwards that it was the most practically grounded paper they had heard all year. She thanked them. She took their cards. She ate dinner alone. She went home. Joonseok found her name. Or rather, the shape of her name, the outline where a name should be, on a rainy Wednesday in October. He had been pulling threads on the ghost signature for several weeks, and the threads had led him sideways into a set of public disclosures from a professional standards body in Nigeria, an education regulatory authority that had, 6 years ago, published a summary of unresolved complaints involving a private school's scholarship administration. The complaints were redacted, standard practice for unresolved cases, but the redactions were imperfect, bureaucratic PDFs often were, and the metadata showed original document names that included institutional codes and year references. He was a patient man. He had time and institutional resources that took him several days to deploy correctly. What he found, when the documents resolved, was not evidence. It was the shape of something that had been improperly closed. A complaint filed by a scholarship recipient against an institution, citing procedural misconduct in the handling of a mathematics competition result. Withdrawn. But the withdrawal was dated to within 2 weeks of a new family enrolling at the institution with a substantial donation to the Library Extension Fund. He noted this in his private list. He noted, female complainant, scholarship category, year cohort aligning with the Park family's Nigerian residency period. He noted, withdrawal timing. He noted, carefully, a reference in the complaint to a Park family name, not the current Park Jiyoung, but a family member. A child. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He had been trying to understand for months why the ghost signature kept appearing around the same family's business interests. He had assumed it was purely financial. A corruption pattern, greased transactions, the usual architecture of money finding shortcuts through regulatory processes. He was now wondering whether there was a deeper source. Whether the habit of paying to make problems disappear had started before the Korean business career. Whether it had started with a school in Ibadan and a scholarship student who had caused temporary inconvenience. He began a new section in his private notes. He wrote, "Who else is looking?" He had sensed it for months, the absence of information that indicated presence. Someone had been in these archives before him, not recently. Carefully, over time, leaving no marks. But the pathway was there if you knew what clean footprints looked like. He was a detective. He knew what clean footprints looked like. He did not know who had made them, but he was beginning to form a theory. It was November when things began to move at a pace she had not chosen. Omowunmi was in the middle of a Year 10 lesson, a discussion unit on colonial-era land appropriation in sub-Saharan Africa with comparative cases, when the classroom door opened. The school's deputy principal, Park Chan-soo, stood in the doorway with an expression she had learned over 3 years to read accurately. Discomfort, reluctance, managed bad news. Miss Adeyemi, a word when you have a moment. Class, continue your discussion questions. I will return in 5 minutes. She kept her voice even. She closed the door behind her. Chan-soo did not waste time. He was an efficient man and he was sorry, she could see that, but efficiency won. We have received a formal complaint about you from a parent. Which parent? Mrs. Park Yeonjun. He paused. The complaint alleges that you have demonstrated a pattern of bias in your treatment of her son, Jiyoung, that you have marked his work inconsistently and made remarks in class that he found targeted. She waited. She has also suggested, and I want to be direct with you about this, that there may be a personal prior relationship between yourself and the Park family that creates a conflict of interest. Omowunmi said nothing for a moment. She was performing a rapid calculation, not of what to say, but of what had been revealed by the decision to file this complaint. Mrs. Park had moved. She had moved first, not in the way Omowunmi had expected, but in the direction she had anticipated, the administrative flank. An attempt to remove Omowunmi from proximity to the family before Omowunmi could use that proximity. I understand, Omowunmi said. What is the process? We will need to conduct a brief review. Your year 10 marking records, attendance of parent communications, that sort of thing. Standard protocol. He looked uncomfortable. It may be appropriate for you to step back from teaching Jiyoung's class during the review period. How long? 2 to 3 weeks, likely. Perhaps a month. She nodded once. I will cooperate fully with the review. My records are in order. She went back into the classroom. The students looked up. 37 seconds had passed. She had said she would return in 5 minutes. She was early. Good, she said. Let us hear from the left side of the room. What conclusions did you reach? She made dinner that evening with particular care. Not because she was processing through cooking, though she was, because she needed the sensory specificity of it. The smell of egusi soup in a Seoul apartment was the most direct path to her own steadiness she had found. She ate. She cleaned the kitchen. She made tea. Then she sat at her kitchen table and thought for 2 hours. The complaint was not a surprise. The timing was earlier than she had expected. She had anticipated Mrs. Park would wait to see how the threat resolved before escalating. The fact that she had moved this quickly told Omowunmi something about the family's current state of anxiety. They were more exposed than she had known. There was something else happening, not from her direction, that had made them accelerate. She made a note. The suspension from Jiyoung's class was a problem, but a manageable one. The review would find nothing because there was nothing to find. Her marking records were scrupulous. Her communication logs were complete. She had been, in this specific domain, faultless, because she had known this moment might come and had prepared for it. What was more concerning was the suggestion of prior relationship. If Mrs. Park had said this to the deputy principal, she had decided the offensive was worth its risks. She was willing to make the prior history visible, which meant she had calculated that the visibility would work in her favor, would paint Omowunmi as the threat rather than the threatened. This was the move Omowunmi had been most worried about. She picked up her phone. She called Chidinma. It was 2 in the morning in Ibadan. Chidinma answered on the 4th ring, her voice blurred with sleep and then immediately alert. Wunmi. What happened? They have made a move. The mother filed a complaint against me with the school. They mentioned prior relationship. A silence. Then, they are trying to get ahead of it. Yes. Then we need to move faster than you planned. Omowunmi was quiet. This was the thing she had been thinking for 2 hours. The timeline she had constructed was predicated on her having access and proximity until she was ready to place the documentation in the correct hands. Without the class, without the cover of her teaching role, she lost proximity. And if the family escalated further legal pressure, formal complaints to the school board, the kind of sustained institutional pressure that wealth enabled, she would lose her position entirely before she could complete what she had started. She had not expected to be forced to accelerate, but she had prepared for this possibility. I know, she said, I know. How long do you need? 3 weeks, maybe 4. Then start tonight. She hung up. She went to the corner of her bedroom. She moved the floorboard. She lifted the locked box. She opened the folder. She did not need to read it again. She knew it by heart. She was thinking about a name in a police filing. A detective with a specific assignment that had brought him to the edge of the same geography she had been mapping for 4 years. Kang Joonseok. She had been hoping not to need him. To complete this without involving the official structure until the documentation was so complete that the structure had no choice but to respond. But the timeline had changed. She needed a channel. She needed someone who had official authority and a credible existing investigation that her documentation could anchor to. She needed him to come to her, or she needed to go to him. The former was cleaner. The latter was faster. She picked up her notebook. She began to write a letter. Joonseok found the letter on a Thursday in his unit's internal mail slot between a courier envelope and a revised case briefing. It had no return address. It was written by hand on plain white paper in handwriting so precise it looked like it had been formatted. The script was English, a formal register that was neither stiff nor informal, the register of someone who had written carefully for an audience. He read it standing at his desk. It was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph stated, without preamble, that the writer was in possession of documentation concerning the Park Jiyoung family that was relevant to an ongoing investigation. The documentation concerned both Nigerian and Korean jurisdiction irregularities. The writer had been gathering this material over a period of 4 years and was prepared to share it with the appropriate authority. The second paragraph noted, with precision that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, 3 specific filing references from 2 separate municipal archives, references that were in his own private notes, that he had not shared with anyone, that were not in any public case file. The third paragraph gave a contact point, not a phone number, an email address, clearly a temporary account, and a suggested meeting time and place. Thursday the 14th, 7 p.m., a specific café in Mapogu. That was in 8 days. He stood at his desk for a long time. Then he sat down and read the letter again. He had been right. Someone else had been looking. This person had been looking carefully enough to find the specific threads he had found, which meant they had started from a different place and arrived at the same geography, which meant their documentation, if it was what the letter suggested, would corroborate from a direction he could not produce himself. The reference to Nigerian jurisdiction irregularities. He thought about the redacted complaint, the scholarship student, the timeline. He was beginning to understand who had written the letter. He did not know her name yet, but he was beginning to understand the shape of her. He took the letter to his supervisor. His supervisor, Detective Chief Inspector Yoon, read it 3 times. Then he looked at Joonseok over his reading glasses. The filing references. How does a civilian have these? Patient, careful research. All of them are technically public record, difficult to find, but not impossible. This is connected to the Park Jiyoung inquiry, on the periphery. But this, Joonseok pointed to the 3rd paragraph, suggests their documentation goes beyond the financial irregularities. If they have what they say they have, it would give us a predicate that would support a formal case opening. DCI Yoon set the letter down. Is this a credible contact in your assessment? The specificity of the filing references is not something a fabricator would have. They are correct. They are not in any public reporting. He paused. I believe this contact has been building this case for years and has arrived at the point where they need an official anchor to make it move. Or they are trying to compromise an ongoing investigation. Possible. But the evidence of independent long-form work is too detailed for a quick fabrication. DCI Yoon considered this. Attend the meeting, take no documentation, assess credibility, report back before you accept anything. Yes, sir. Joonseok folded the letter carefully and placed it in his inner jacket pocket. Thursday the 14th. He had been waiting for this container to be full. He was beginning to think it might be. She arrived first. She always arrived first. The café was chosen for its specific geometry, corner table with sightlines to both entrances, moderate noise level that made it difficult to be overheard, but not so loud that a conversation required raised voices, regular clientele that would not find 2 strangers talking unusual. She ordered an Americano. She opened a book. She did not look at the door. She heard him arrive at 6:54. She knew it was him from the particular quality of the entrance, a man accustomed to entering places where he might need to observe before being observed, checking angles without making it visible. He sat across from her without asking if the chair was free. She looked up from her book. He was taller than she had expected from the public records. 32, with the compact stillness of someone who had learned early that physical economy communicated authority. His eyes were already doing the thing she had anticipated from a good investigator, rapid, ordered assessment that was not performed for her benefit because he was not performing. He was simply seeing. She let him look. "I wrote the letter," she said. "I know." His voice was low, even, not unfriendly. "I would like to understand some things before we go further." "That is fair." "How do you have the filing references?" 4 years of independent research. All public record. I have documentation of every source. "What is your personal connection to the Park family?" She had expected this question first. "They were students at the same school I attended in Nigeria when I was 17. Their actions during that period destroyed my scholarship, resulted in false academic misconduct charges being filed against me, and derailed my educational and professional trajectory by 7 years." She said this the way she had practiced saying it, with full precision and without visible emotion, because emotion was not what this conversation required. "I have spent 4 years documenting this, and the subsequent financial irregularities that I believe are connected to the same habit of using money and institutional access to suppress consequences." He was quiet. "You are also investigating them," she said. "I am investigating an adjacent area that may intersect with your documentation. The municipal approval's ghost signature." A pause. She watched something move through his expression, not surprise exactly, recognition, the feeling of a theory being confirmed. "You found that. 14 months ago, I flagged it as connected to a pattern I was already tracking. I have 3 instances documented across 2 municipal jurisdictions. You have 2 from a different direction." He looked at her for a long moment. "You have been doing this alone," he said. "Yes, for 4 years. Nearly 4.5. He sat back, not relaxing, readjusting. She watched him recalibrate. It was a process she had observed in her students when a framework they had relied on was no longer adequate and a larger one was needed. "The school filed a complaint against you," he said. "Mrs. Park Yeonjun." She did not show surprise. "You checked." "It is my job," not defensively, factually. "They are trying to remove you from proximity." "Yes. How long do you have before the review concludes?" 4 to 6 weeks, most likely. The review will find nothing substantive. But if the family escalates further, they could pursue a formal school board complaint, which would be a longer process. "And if you lose your position?" "I lose proximity. The documentation is already complete. Losing proximity does not destroy the case, but it removes some avenues for verification." She paused. "I contacted you now because the timeline changed, not because I am not ready." He looked at her carefully. "I need to see the documentation before I can make any official commitment." "I know. This cannot be a private arrangement. If I bring this forward, it has to go through official channels. DCI Yoon will need to be read in." "I understand official channels. I have been preparing this for an official channel." "What do you want?" She had thought about this question more than any other in 4 years. Because the answer to this question was not tactical. The answer to this question was the thing underneath everything else. "I want the record to be accurate," she said. "I want what happened to be documented somewhere that outlasts my private folder. I want there to be a formal finding that says these things occurred and that the people who did them are accountable for them." She paused. "I do not need to be in the room when it happens. I do not need them to know it was me. I just need it to happen." He was quiet for a long time. "That is unusual," he said. "What is?" "Most people in your position want to be in the room. Most people in my position have not had 4.5 years to think about the difference between justice and revenge." He looked at her with an expression she could not immediately read. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a card on the table. "I need a week. I need to take what you have told me to my supervisor in general terms, no specifics, no documentation yet, and assess what an official approach would look like." He looked at her directly. Do not send anything to anyone else. Not yet. Give me a week. She picked up the card, looked at it, looked back at him. Kang Joonseok, she said. And you are… She had not told him her name. She had not signed the letter. She had not used an identifiable email. Omowunmi Adeyemi, she said. I teach history. He nodded once, as if this was the answer he had expected. He stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at her one more time with those ordered, assessing eyes. 1 week, he said. He left. She watched him cross the café and exit through the door facing Mapodero. She watched him not look back. She picked up her coffee. She finished it. She paid. She went home. She slept. He took exactly 7 days. She did not contact him during that time. She had her own work to do. The school review had officially begun. She had submitted her full marking records, her communication logs, her student assessment history for the past 3 years. The documentation was comprehensive and clean. The work of someone who had always known this was possible and had prepared for it without making preparation obvious. The deputy principal, Chansu, had been careful to be fair. She appreciated this. He was a man who took his professional obligations seriously and who was visibly uncomfortable with the situation, not because he doubted Omowunmi, but because he was a reasonable person placed between two forces that were not remotely equivalent and was trying to apply reasonable process to an unreasonable situation. She continued teaching her other classes. She had Year 9 on Tuesday and Thursday, Year 12 once a week. The students noticed that she was teaching with slightly elevated focus and said nothing about it. Jiyoung she did not see. This was correct. She had no feelings about it either way. She had always been clear with herself that the child was separate from the accounting. On the 5th day, she received a message from the temporary email account. DCIUN has been briefed in general terms. The response is cautious, but not negative. There is interest in the financial irregularities documentation, specifically. I need to see the full file before I can take it further. Can you bring it on Thursday? She replied. Yes, same café, 6 p.m. She spent Wednesday evening reviewing the file one final time. She had been alone with this folder for 4.5 years. The knowledge of what was in it had been a weight and a comfort simultaneously. Weight because carrying it was real, daily work, and comfort because it was the only version of the story that was true. The world had other versions. Versions that said nothing happened, or that what happened was minor, or that time had resolved it. The folder said otherwise, precisely and sourced and dated. She was about to give it to someone else. She sat with this for a long time. She had always known this was the plan. Give it to the channel that could make it official. Step back. Let the process be the process. She had always said she did not need to be in the room. But sitting with the folder the night before she handed it over, she understood something that the 4-year plan had not fully accounted for. She would still be the person this happened to. The process, if it worked, would create an official record, a finding, accountability for the financial irregularities, potentially for the original conduct if the Nigeria jurisdiction could be engaged, which was uncertain. The parks would face consequences. The consequences would be real, but Omowunmi Adeyemi would still be the person who had lost 7 years of her trajectory to something that should never have happened. The official record would not give those 7 years back. She had known this intellectually, but knowing it in her body, in the hour before the thing she had built was released into the world, was different. She sat with it. Then she closed the folder, replaced it in the box, and went to bed. Tomorrow was tomorrow. Tonight she would sleep. He was there before her on Thursday. She saw him from outside the café window. He had taken a different table this time, positioned differently, and she understood why. He had brought a colleague. A woman, senior from her posture, reading glasses on a chain. This would be DCIUN, or someone DCIUN had sent. Omowunmi recalibrated. She had prepared for a conversation with Joonseok. She had not prepared for a formal meeting. She entered. He stood briefly. She did not read this as courtesy, she read it as acknowledgement. He had seen her hesitate at the window, and he was telling her with the gesture that the shift was intentional and deliberate, and that she should not read it as a power move. She sat. Miss Adeyemi, the senior officer said. I am Detective Chief Inspector Yoon Jiyoung. Detective Kang has briefed me on the nature of your contact. She had a direct quality that Omowunmi recognized from her own students, the ones who had decided, at some point, to simply stop performing and start being precise. I want to understand what you have before we go further. What would you like to know? The Nigerian jurisdiction events, what is your expectation for those, given the limitation period challenges? Omowunmi had prepared for this question. She walked Jiyoung through the specific provisions she had researched, the arguments available, the complications. Jiyoung listened with attention she had earned. They went back and forth precisely. 30 minutes in, Joonseok said quietly, "Can we see the file?" She placed the folder on the table. It landed with the specific weight of 4.5 years. Joonseok did not immediately open it. He looked at her first. "This is everything," he said, not a question. "Originals and copies. The originals are with my lawyer in Lagos." She had arranged this a year ago. "I have a formal deposited copy with a sealed law firm in Seoul. This copy is for you." She paused. "I am retaining legal representation independent of this process." "That is the correct decision," Jiyoung said. "I know." Jiyoung opened the folder. She turned pages slowly, reading. Joonseok read alongside her on the sections he had not seen. The café continued around them, coffee orders, the sound of spoons on cups, a conversation about football from the table behind them. 11 minutes passed. Jiyoung looked up. "The ghost signatures," she said. 3 instances. 2 matching Detective Kang's documentation, 1 additional in a Siadimungu filing from 2020. Joonseok made a note. "The academic misconduct claim from 2013, Jiyoung continued. "The formal complaint that was withdrawn. The diary evidence from the witness corroborates the timeline and the specific mechanism by which the complaint was filed and withdrawn. The witness is prepared to give a formal statement. The second witness, the one who confirmed the scholarship application interference, he is less willing to testify formally. He has documented what he can in a signed affidavit. He is concerned about professional consequences. I am not pressuring him." She said this clearly. "I would rather have less formal testimony from real people than coerced testimony that degrades under cross-examination." Jiyoung looked at her over the reading glasses with an expression that was not quite a smile. "You have thought about this carefully." "I have had time." Another pause. Then Jiyoung said, "I am going to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. Yes. Is there anything in this folder that was obtained through illegal means?" "Anything?" Omowunmi met her eyes. "No, every source is listed. Every document was obtained through public access with correct procedure or directly from the person who gave it. I am aware of what would happen to the case if the evidence was tainted." "Good." Jiyoung closed the folder. She looked at Joonseok. He nodded once very slightly. Jiyoung looked back at Omowunmi. "I will take this forward for formal case assessment. This will not be a fast process. The Nigerian jurisdiction requires liaison with Korean foreign affairs channels and Interpol cooperation at some level. The financial irregularities in the Korean jurisdiction are more direct and will move faster. I understand fast is not the point. What is the point in your view?" "The accurate record," Omowunmi said. "The point is the accurate record." Jiyoung stood. She picked up the folder. She said, "Miss Adeyemi, for what it is worth, this is one of the most rigorously prepared civilian documentation sets I have seen in 15 years of investigation. You could have been a prosecutor." "I know," Omowunmi said. "I was supposed to be." Jiyoung looked at her once more, then she left. Joonseok remained. The café settled back into its ordinary rhythms around them. He did not say anything immediately. She noticed this about him, the specific quality of his silences, which were not uncomfortable, but were real, actual spaces in which something was being processed that did not require verbal fill. She found she did not feel the need to fill them either. After some time, he said, "How are you?" It was not a procedural question. The question's texture was different. It was the question a person asked when they wanted to know the actual answer. She thought about it honestly. "I feel strange," she said. "I knew this was the plan, giving it to the official process, but knowing and doing are not the same." "What does strange feel like?" lighter and also more exposed. When I held it, I had it. Now it is moving in ways I cannot control. That is accurate. He turned his coffee cup. The case will develop in ways that are not entirely predictable. DCI Yoon will do what she said. But the Nigerian jurisdiction is genuinely uncertain. There are things that may not be prosecutable regardless of the evidence quality. I know. And the family may pursue countermeasures. If they engage legal counsel, there will be pressure on you. I have representation. Good, he looked at her. The school review will find nothing. I already know the outcome. She paused. And I am leaving the school. He looked up. Not because of the complaint. Because the complaint has made the situation active in a way that makes my teaching ineffective. The students will eventually learn something is happening, and it will change the environment. She spoke with the precision of someone who had thought about this. I submitted my notice this morning. I will finish the term. What will you do? She had not been asked this question by anyone, because she had been the only person who knew enough of the full situation to ask it. I have a standing offer from a research institute in Lagos. Part of the work connects to what I presented in Busan, transitional justice mechanisms, educational institutions. She paused. I turned it down 2 years ago because I was not ready to leave yet. I accepted it this morning. He was quiet. Lagos, he said. Yes. Another silence. This one had a different quality, the weight of a word being considered from the inside. When do you leave? End of term, February. He nodded. He was looking at his coffee cup again. She watched him. She had not expected this. That was the honest thing, that she had not expected to sit across from this man 3 times and feel the specific, careful recognition of encountering someone whose way of being in the world was recognizable to her. Not the same as her way, but the same quality of deliberateness, the same willingness to sit in silence because silence was accurate. She had not built room for this in the plan. She did not know what to do with that. He looked up. He saw her looking. He did not look away. I would like to keep you informed of the case progress, he said, as much as is officially appropriate. I would like that. And, he paused. The pause was different from his procedural pauses. This one was the pause of someone who was choosing whether to step across a line. I would like to have dinner, not about the case. She did not answer immediately. She thought about the plan, the 4-year plan that had no room in it for this. That had been constructed as a closed system. Documentation, channel, official process, done. No personal complications. No additional things to feel. She thought about the folder, which was now in DCI Yoon's hands. She thought about Lagos in February. I leave in 12 weeks, she said. I know. 12 weeks is not very long. I know. She looked at him. He was patient in the way she was patient, the kind of patience that was not passive, that had been chosen and maintained and was ongoing work. He was not pushing. He was not performing ease. He was simply there, waiting for her actual answer, willing to accept either one. Thursday, she said. There is a Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon. The jollof is almost right. He almost smiled. It was very small and it changed his face significantly. Thursday, he said. Besties, besties. Did you feel that? Did you feel the specific, quiet, unhurried way that happened? 2 people who have spent their professional lives being precise, being honest with each other. No grand gesture. No rushing. Just Thursday. Drop a comment if that is the most romantic thing you have read in months. The restaurant was small and warm, and the owner recognized her. She had been coming for 2 years, always alone, always the same order. The owner looked at Joonseok with the specific evaluation of someone who cares about their regular customer, and said nothing, but said everything with the looking. The jollof was not exactly right. She had said this, but it was close enough that it did something to the space between her chest and her throat. They talked for 3 hours, not about the case. She had said not about the case, and he had agreed, and he was the kind of man who kept his agreements. He told her about Gwangyang, about the port and the particular quality of growing up in a city where everything arrived from somewhere else and left for somewhere further, and what that does to a person's sense of permanence and distance. About his father, who could identify a cargo ship's origin by the way it rode in the water, and his mother who taught quadratic equations to 12-year-olds with a patience that was its own kind of love. She told him about Iwo, about the way Yoruba towns are built around their histories, the way you cannot walk 3 streets without encountering something named for someone who did something generations ago, about her mother, who was a seamstress and could read a person's social aspiration from the way they described the clothes they wanted, about the specific bitterness and then specific resolve of sitting in a university library at 22, doing the coursework she should have done at 17, and deciding that the delay was material she would eventually use. "Did you know then," he asked, "that you would do what you did?" "I knew I would not be finished with it," she said. "The specifics, the folder, the documentation, those came later, when I understood that emotion alone was not actionable." "What changed?" She thought about it. "I found the first public record, a municipal filing. I had been looking for something else entirely, and there it was a signature that I recognized the logic of, even before I knew what it was attached to. And I thought they are still doing this. In a different country, in a different language to different people, but the same habit. And the habit has a paper trail." She looked at him. "And I thought, paper trails can be followed. You became an investigator. I became someone who understood what evidence is for." He looked at her with the expression she had first seen in the café, the ordered assessment that was not performed for her benefit. Except now, after 3 hours of actual conversation, she understood it differently. It was not assessment. It was attention. He paid attention with the specific quality of someone who had decided that seeing accurately was the most important thing he could offer. She was not used to being seen accurately. She found it disorienting, not uncomfortably so, but real. "What is Lagos like?" he said. "The Institute. I have not been there yet. I have spoken with the director twice. The work is on post-conflict educational institution reform, how schools rebuild curriculum after periods of suppression or corruption. It suits me." "It does. The city," she paused. "I grew up 4 hours from Lagos. I have been to Lagos many times, but I have not lived there. I think it will be loud in the way that is absorbing rather than overwhelming. I think I will need some time." "You will have time." "Yes," she looked at him. "Korea has been a quiet chapter. I chose it for that reason. I needed the quiet. I needed to be in a place where I was unknown and the only thing I had to do was the work." She paused. "The work is done now. Almost done." "Almost," she agreed. "The next part belongs to the process." He turned his glass slowly. "Do you know," he stopped, then, "never mind." "Say it." He looked at her. "I was going to ask if you know whether it will be enough, when the process concludes, whether it will be what you need it to be." She was quiet. This was the question she had asked herself in her apartment the night before handing over the folder, the question she had sat with without fully resolving. "I think," she said carefully, "that I have been carrying this for long enough that I cannot entirely imagine what I will feel when it is done. But I know what I have built. And I know that what I have built is real and true, and that it will create a real consequence, even if the consequence is not perfectly shaped to the wound." She paused. "It will have been worth carrying." He nodded. Not because it was what she should say, because it was accurate. They stayed until the restaurant was almost empty. The owner brought them small cups of pap and groundnut oil and smiled at her in the way of someone who is glad a regular customer has brought someone. She did not object to the implication. Walking back toward the subway, the air was cold and clear, the kind of November cold that has not yet become bitter but is preparing itself. He walked beside her at the specific distance that was close but not presumptuous, and she noticed this and said nothing about it. At the Mapogu station, he said, "I would like to do this again while you are still here." "You have 9 weeks," she said. "I know, 9 weeks is not very long." She looked at him in the cold light outside the subway entrance. "No," she said, "but it is enough to start with." The school review concluded in its 4th week with no substantive findings against her. The deputy principal, Chan-soo, delivered the outcome in person, in his office, with a formality that bordered on apology. She accepted it with graciousness and handed him her formal resignation notice simultaneously. He looked at the notice for a moment. Then he said, "The school will be less for your leaving, Miss Adeyemi." "The next person will be good," she said. "Someone always is." She spent her last weeks at Hanguk teaching with the specific concentration of someone who has decided to finish what she started. The Year 9 class was midway through a unit on the scramble for Africa. The Year 12 class was preparing for university entrance papers on post-war Korean democratization movements. She taught both with care. On her last day, she came into the Year 9 classroom to find that someone, she never found out who, had placed a small potted plant on her desk. A succulent, the kind that survives without much water. There was a card. It said, "Plants need time to grow too. Thank you, teacher." She stood at the desk for a moment. Then she picked up the plant, put it in her bag, and taught her last lesson. 9 weeks became 8, then 6, then 4. They had dinner on Thursdays consistently. Sometimes other evenings when the casework allowed him time, she would receive a message, precise and short, "Free at 7 if you are." And she would either be free or she would not be, and they had an unspoken agreement that neither answer required justification. She watched him work. Not the case. He was scrupulous about what he shared, and she trusted the official process enough now to let it be official without her supervision. But she watched the way he moved through days, the quality of attention he brought to the people in his life, the specific way he paid attention that was not performed. On the 7th Thursday, he said, "I would like to tell you something. Not about the case. Tell me. I have been thinking about what you said in the café, the first time, about justice and revenge. One of them can sleep." She waited. "I have been doing this work for 8 years, he said, and I thought I understood the distinction. I thought justice was the official version of what revenge wants, the same outcome, just cleaner, more procedurally legitimate." He turned his glass. "You have changed how I understand it." "How?" "You do not want to be there. You have never wanted to be there in the room when they face it. You want the record to exist. The record existing matters more to you than the experiencing of their consequence." He looked at her. "I have never encountered that in 8 years of investigation. Most people, even people with legitimate grievances and legitimate cases, want the satisfaction. The presence, the eye contact. I will be in the room," she said. "When it goes to hearing, if it goes to hearing, I will be in the gallery. I know, but not to see their faces, to see the record being made official." She thought about this. "Perhaps that is my version of presence," she said. "The record becoming permanent, the thing that cannot be undone even after everyone in the room has left. That is a very long way of thinking. 10 years is a long time," she said. "You learn to think in structures that outlast you." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, very quietly, "I am going to miss you." She looked at him. She had not expected the directness of it. He was a direct man. She had come to know this. But the directness was usually contained within careful limits, and he had maintained careful limits with her, and she had understood the limits and not pushed against them. This was different. "I will be in Lagos," she said. "I know where you will be." She looked at him. He looked at her. The restaurant was quiet around them, a Tuesday, not a Thursday, because he had been free and she had been free. "There are flights," she said, "between here and Lagos." "There are. 12 hours, 13 with a connection." She paused. "It is not close." "No, but it is not impossible." "No," he said, "it is not impossible." She picked up her coffee. She held it. She said, "Ask me." He was quiet. "Then, after you arrive, after you have had time." He looked at her with those careful, attentive eyes. "Would you like company in Lagos?" Not a demand, not a declaration. A question shaped to give her every option. She thought about the 4-year plan, the closed system, the chapter that was ending. She thought about the next chapter, which had not been planned at all, which was the point of it. "Yes," she said. "I would like company." Something in his face shifted, not dramatically, not with performance. The subtle reshaping of a person who has been holding a hope carefully and has just been told it is allowed. She noticed it. She said nothing about it. She let it be his. The last Thursday before her February departure was the 8th one. She knew it was the last when she woke that morning. Not because she had counted, though she had, in the way she counted everything, but because the apartment had a particular quality that morning. A stillness that was different from its usual stillness. The stillness of something that is ending and knows it. She packed 3 more boxes before he arrived. Books, primarily. She had too many books for the weight allowance she had calculated. She was keeping them all anyway. He came at 7 as always. He had brought food this time, not from the Itaewon restaurant, but something he had made himself. She did not ask him when he had learned to cook Korean-style stews. She simply accepted the containers and set them on the counter and found that her throat had tightened in a way she had not authorized. "You are packing," he said. He looked at the boxes against the wall. "I leave in 12 days. "I know." He set down his jacket. He looked at her apartment, the bare shelves where her books had been, the gaps on the walls where she had taken down the prints she had collected over 3 years in Seoul. The space had a dismantled quality, the honesty of a life in transit. "It looks different," he said. "It feels different," she said. They ate standing at her kitchen counter because both chairs were stacked with things waiting to be decided about. She had not planned for dinner guests on packing days. He had come anyway. She had opened the door anyway. These were choices they had both made without discussing them. That had become its own language between them in 8 Thursdays. Afterwards, he helped her move boxes. He did it without asking, the way he did most useful things directly, without ceremony. She directed. He lifted. They worked in the comfortable quiet of people who have learned each other's rhythm. At some point, she stopped directing. She was standing in the middle of the room, a stack of journals in her hands, and she had simply stopped moving. The journals were the last of the Kingsbridge documentation, not the evidence folder, which was already with DCI Yoon, but the personal record. Her own account, written in 3 notebooks over 10 years, of what had happened and what she had done about it. She stood and held them and felt the weight of 10 years in her arms. Joonseok was at the other end of the room. He saw her stop. He set down what he was carrying. He crossed to her. "I have been carrying this since I was 17, she said. She was not talking about the journals. She was not talking about the journals. "I don't know who I am without it." He did not say you will be fine. He did not say it gets easier. He had never been the kind of man who reached for comfort before truth. "You are still the person who built it," he said. "You do not stop being that when the work is done. The work is part of you. It is just no longer in your arms." She looked at him. He was standing very close. Seoul in January outside the window, the particular cold that had not broken yet, the specific late-night quiet of a residential street near Mapogu subway. She set the journals down on the nearest surface. "Joonseok," she said. "Yes. I need you to understand something before I leave. Tell me. I have spent 4 years building a structure that required me to feel nothing that was not useful. Every feeling had to justify its presence in terms of what it served." She paused. "And then you sat down across from me in a café without asking permission and looked at me with those eyes, and I could not locate which category that fell under." He was quiet. "It has been inconvenient," she said. "I want you to know that." Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile more precise than that. The look of a person who has been handed something they had not permitted themselves to want. "I am aware," he said, "that I have been inconvenient. Significantly. And yet you opened the door tonight." "Yes," she said. "I opened the door." The space between them was very small. She had planned so many things in her life. Built systems, documented processes, constructed timelines in precise handwriting that looked like print. She had not planned this. She had not built a framework for this. She was going to have to be present without a framework. That was, she understood, the point. She stepped across the small remaining distance and kissed him, not dramatically, not as a beginning or an ending, as a fact. The way she stated facts, directly and without excess. He received it the same way, his hands coming to rest on her face with the care of a person who understood that what they were holding was real and required precision. She pulled back enough to look at him. "I leave in 12 days, she said again. "I know." His thumbs traced the line of her jaw. 12 days is not very long." "No," she said, "but it is enough." She took his hand. She led him away from the boxes and the dismantled shelves and the journals and the weight of 10 years. To the one room in the apartment that was still intact, her bedroom, which she had not packed yet, which still held her things arranged the way they had been for 3 years, which still felt like her. She closed the door. What happened in that room happened slowly. That was what she noticed. Not what she had expected. She had not been planning for expectations. She had been deliberately not building a framework. But what she found herself noticing, in the way she noticed everything, which was carefully and with full attention. He was unhurried. He matched her rhythm, which was not fast, which had never been fast, which understood that the thing you rush through is the thing you do not fully have. He asked. That was the thing she had not anticipated and found she needed more than she had known. Not constantly, not as interruption, but at the moments that mattered. A quiet "is this what you want?" and she said yes. A pause and a look that asked the same question without sound, and she answered the same way. It was the language of someone who had spent 8 years in a profession that required him to read situations accurately and had brought that same quality here, turned fully toward her. She was not used to being read accurately. She had built the folder alone. She had carried the grief alone. She had constructed her stillness around a core that no one else had touched because she had not allowed touching, because allowing it required trusting that the thing touching you would not use what it found. She trusted him. That was the simple, extraordinary fact of it. In 8 Thursdays and 1 letter and 3 cups of coffee and the specific quality of his silences, she had arrived at trust. Not the theoretical trust of a person who has assessed risk and found it acceptable. The actual trust, the kind that lives in the body, that relaxes the shoulders, that lets you close your eyes. She closed her eyes. He learned her the way he learned everything, carefully, attending to what mattered, adjusting when she needed adjusting, not performing competence but practicing actual presence. She felt at some point that she had stopped monitoring the situation from the outside and had simply arrived inside it. Inside her own life, fully and without the part of her that was always watching, always documenting, always building the record. There was no record here. There was only this. When it was over, they lay still in the particular silence of 2 people who have said something to each other that does not require words to complete. Outside the window, Seoul continued, cold and lit and entirely indifferent to what had just happened in this room. She was not indifferent. She lay on her back and looked at the ceiling and felt the specific quiet of a woman who has put something down after 10 years and has not yet learned how to describe the absence of the weight. He said nothing. He was lying beside her, and she could feel the warmth of him, and his breathing had the evenness of someone who was still fully present rather than already somewhere else. She had not known she needed that, to not be somewhere else, to not be mentally moving to the next item. She was here, just here. Joonseok, she said. Yes, I did not plan this. I know. I want you to know that it is not casual. That this is not, I do not do casual. She said it precisely. This matters, you matter. 12 days and 12 hours is not how I would have designed it if I were designing it. He turned his head to look at her. You would have built a folder, he said. 8 sections, timeline, witnesses, legal strategy. She looked at him. Probably, she said. Then I am glad, he said, that you did not design it. She looked at the ceiling again. She thought about this for a moment. Then she said, 12 days. 12 days, he agreed. I am going to use them properly. Good, he said, and his voice had the quality it had when he had almost smiled, that small transformation, the face showing the person inside it. Beginning with Thursday, she said, which is in 2 days. Thursday, he confirmed. She closed her eyes. She slept. She always slept. Justice could sleep, but this was not justice sleeping. This was something else, something she did not have a category for yet. Something she was going to have to build a new framework for, from scratch, without the folder. She found she was not afraid of that. She found, in fact, that it was the first thing in a very long time that she had wanted to build for its own sake rather than for what it would produce. That was enough. For tonight, entirely enough. Drop a comment right now. Drop a fire if that scene reached you the way I think it reached you. Not because of what happened, because of who it happened to. Because this is a woman who has been holding herself at perfect remove for 10 years, and she just let someone all the way in. That is not small. That is enormous. Tell me you felt it. The departure was on a Tuesday. Joonseok came to the airport. This had not been discussed. He appeared in arrivals, then corrected himself, found the departures hall, sent her a message. Which gate? She sent him the gate number. He arrived with a small paper bag. Inside was a book, not romantic, not sentimental. A recently published research text on truth commissions in post-conflict societies by an author she had mentioned once in passing 3 months ago. She looked at it. She looked at him. For the plane, he said. She put it in her bag. They stood in the departures hall with the particular texture of an ending that is also a beginning, the specific airport light that is neither comfortable nor harsh, the noise of arrivals and departures, and the continuous movement of people going somewhere. The case, she said. The financial irregularities case will likely go to formal indictment within 6 months. The Nigerian jurisdiction coordination has begun. Interpol contact is established. He said it clinically, the way he said official things. The hearing, when it occurs, will be notified to your legal representative. You will be formally notified regardless of whether you choose to attend. And you believe it will hold. The documentation is extraordinary. DCI Yoon said that 3 times in the 3 weeks she has been reviewing it. He paused. I believe it will hold. She nodded. Thank you, she said. For what specifically? For taking the letter seriously, for going to DCI Yoon. For, she paused, for seeing it as what it was, not as an amateur attempting to interfere with an investigation, as what it was. It was the most complete piece of independent documentation I have seen in 8 years, he said. Seeing it accurately was not an act of generosity. Sometimes accurate seeing is. He looked at her. He did not disagree. Her flight was called. She picked up her bag. She looked at him one more time, he said. February in Lagos is warm. Yes, I will check my calendar. She almost smiled. It was very small. Check it soon, she said. She walked toward the gate. She did not look back, not because she did not want to. Because forward was the direction the plan had always been pointing. But she felt him watching her until the gate door closed between them. She had not documented that. She had simply felt it. That was new. 6 months later. August. The courtroom in Seoul was a standard administrative design, institutional lighting, rows of fixed seating, the particular acoustic quality of a room built for formal proceedings. She had been to courtrooms before, as a researcher, observing transitional justice processes in other countries. She had never been in one for herself. She sat in the gallery, 3rd row, the center of the aisle, where the sightline to the defendant's table was unobstructed. The financial irregularities case had proceeded faster than the Nigerian jurisdiction elements. Corporate crime with Korean nexus, prosecuted under Korean law, with documentation that DCI Yoon had described to the court as exceptional in its completeness and cross-referencing. The Nigerian coordination was still ongoing, moving through the slower channels of international cooperation. But this hearing was real. This hearing was today. Park Jiyoung sat at the defendant's table with his legal team. A man in his mid-50s, well-dressed with the precision of someone for whom presentation was always intentional. He was looking at the documentation on the table before him. He had not looked at the gallery. Joonseok was not in the courtroom. Witnesses and investigators did not sit in gallery proceedings, and he had a separate briefing with the prosecution team before taking the stand in a later session. He had sent her a message that morning, room 4 billion. 3rd row has the best sightline. She had not needed his navigation, but she understood why he had sent it. The proceedings began. The charges were read in formal Korean, the translation audible through the headset she had been provided as an international observer. Financial misconduct, regulatory corruption, bribery of a public official. 3 counts, each with documentation attached. This was not the full accounting. She knew that. The Nigerian jurisdiction elements, the scholarship interference, the academic misconduct framing, the 2 years of systematic cruelty to a 17-year-old girl on a scholarship, those were moving, but slowly, through different channels. They might result in formal action. They might not. The limitation period challenges were real. The official record would not perfectly match the wound. She had known this for years. But this, Park Jiyoung's lawyer made a submission. The prosecutor responded. The judge asked 3 clarifying questions about documentary sourcing. The transcript was being made. The charges were being formally entered. The case number existed. The documentation was now a matter of public record. This was permanent. This could not be undone. Jiyoung's lawyer said something. Jiyoung turned slightly to respond, and in the movement his gaze swept the gallery in the automatic way of a person who has spent 30 years reading rooms. His eyes stopped. Omowunmi was there, calm, present, unhurried. She looked at him the way she had taught herself to look at things that required accurate seeing, without performance, without satisfaction, without the display of any particular feeling. Just full, direct, unblinking presence. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he looked away. She did not look away. She held the space where his gaze had been for 3 more seconds. Then she turned her attention back to the proceedings. The judge was speaking. She listened. She was going to listen until the record was complete. Besties, besties. She did not flinch. She did not triumph. She did not reach for anything she was not ready for. She simply did not look away. That is the story. That look, that staying, that is the whole story. 6 weeks later. Omowunmi's apartment in Lagos was smaller than the Seoul one and noisier. The street outside had a market that ran until 10 at night, and the building's other residents had conversations at volumes that Seoul would have found impolite. She had adjusted. She was adjusting. She was genuinely adjusting. The institute work was as absorbing as she had anticipated. The director was a brilliant, difficult woman who gave feedback in blunt sentences and expected complete sentences back. Omowunmi appreciated her enormously. She had 2 houseplants now. The succulent from Hanguk International, which had survived the move with unnerving ease, and a small pothos that the market stall 2 streets over had sold her on a Saturday morning for 100 naira. On a Thursday evening in September, she had kept the Thursdays, she noticed. Without consciously planning to, her phone showed a message from a Seoul number. My calendar has an opening in October, if the offer is still open. She looked at the message. She thought about the 12-hour flight, the 13-hour one with a connection, the space between here and there that was not close but was also not impossible. She typed, "The offer is still open. Bring comfortable clothes. Lagos in October is warm." He replied after a moment, "I am aware. I checked." She set down her phone. She looked out the window at the market street, at the noise and color and specifically Lagos' quality of life happening below her at 7 in the evening on a weekday. She had not planned this chapter. She had built a plan and executed it and arrived at the other side, and the other side had a window with a market street and October footsteps approaching from 12 hours away. She thought about what she had told her students in Seoul in a history class on a Tuesday morning. Justice is willing to wait. Justice can survive the person who first needed it. She was the person who had first needed it. She had survived. The record existed. The plan was done. What came next was hers to build. She picked up the book he had given her at the airport. She had been reading it slowly, the way she read things she wanted to remember. She went to the window. She began to read. And then her phone lit up again. Not Joonseok this time. A different number. One she recognized. One she had not seen in 6 months, not since before the handoff, not since the timeline accelerated and she had moved faster than she intended. She looked at it for a long time. It was a Lagos number. The name attached to it was one she had documented in Section 3 of the folder, not the ringleader, one of the other 4. Still in Lagos then, still within reach. The message read, "I heard what happened in Seoul. I need to talk to you. I have information about Jiyoung that was not in any folder. Information about what she is planning now." Omowunmi's hand was very still on the phone. She read the message twice. Outside the window, the market street continued its noise and light. Lagos in September, humid and loud and moving. She set the book down. She went to the corner of the new bedroom, smaller than the Seoul one, with different light, and opened the drawer of the desk she had not yet fully organized. She found a new notebook. She sat down at the desk. She opened it to the first page. She picked up her pen. She did not write anything yet. She simply sat with the blank page and the question and the specific feeling of a woman who has just discovered that the work she thought was finished has a new opening. In Seoul, Kang Joonseok was 12 hours away. She was going to need him to know about this. She was also going to need to think carefully before she told him anything. Because the thing about building a case once was that you learned what to document first and what to follow next. And the thing about this particular opening, this contact, this name, this Lagos number, was that it was pointing at something she had not known she did not know. Jiyoung, not the father, not the business irregularities, not the municipal ghost signature. Jiyoung, the daughter, the one who had started it all. The one who had gone to a good university and built a good life and moved into exactly the excellent future that the scheme at Kingsbridge had secured for her. Omowunmi had documented Jiyoung's current life, professional position, public profile, the small and large untruths embedded in her record, but she had not known there was something Jiyoung was planning now. She turned the pen slowly in her fingers. She thought about what she had told her students. Justice is willing to wait. She thought about Chidinma's diary, about the ghost signature, about the folder that was now in official hands, moving through the machinery of the law. She thought about a blank first page. She wrote a date at the top. She wrote a question mark. Then she closed the notebook. She picked up her phone. She did not call Joonseok. Not yet. She called Chidinma instead. It rang twice. "Wunmi." Chidinma's voice was immediately alert, the way it always was. "I was going to call you." "You already know," Omowunmi said. "I got a message too." "Same number." "Yes." A pause. "Wunmi, whatever she is planning, it is not small. The person who sent the message. She left Kingsbridge before you did. She knows things about that school that were never in any folder." Omowunmi was quiet. Then she said, "Tell me." And outside her window, Lagos continued its noise and color and life, indifferent and magnificent. And inside the room, Omowunmi Adeyemi opened the notebook again. She began a new section. This was season 2. She was ready. "Besties, we are done. And I want to ask you the question I have been holding since the beginning. What is the difference between justice and revenge?" She told her class. "One of them can sleep. I want to add something to that now that we have reached the end of season 1. One of them can also love, can build something after, can have a Thursday dinner and a January airport and a September text message from a number she saved under a name. Revenge is the end of the road. Justice is the road itself, and the road continues after the courthouse, after the gallery, after the eyes that did not look away. But besties, one more thing. Justice is also willing to begin again, because Jiyoung is still out there. And Omowunmi just opened a new notebook. And Kang Joonseok is 12 hours away and does not yet know what she knows. And Chidinma is on the phone, and what she is about to say is going to change everything about what season 2 looks like. Drop a comment telling me, 1, do you believe Omowunmi is done? Or is she just starting? 2, what do you think Jiyoung is planning? Because the daughter who started all of this, she has been building her own life while her father faced the court. She has been watching. She has been quiet. And quiet in this story means thinking. 3, what do you need Joonseok to do when he hears? Does he fly to Lagos? Does he open a new file? Does he say this cannot be official yet, be careful, wait for me? Share this season 1 finale with someone who needs to hear that patience is not weakness. That building something slowly is not the same as not building. That the women who never raise their voices are sometimes the most dangerous ones in the room. Like this video, subscribe to Dark Afro-K Diaries TV. Season 2 of The Woman Who Counted is coming. And Omowunmi, she has a new notebook. She always sleeps. She always begins again. You are not too quiet. You are not too patient. You are not too anything. You are exactly on time. This is Dark Afro-K Diaries TV. We will see you in season 2.